The clock ticked past midnight. Shadows stretched long and thin across the room. A lone window, like a watchful eye, gazed out into the inky blackness. Inside, bathed in the cold, flickering glow of a computer screen, sat Alex. Alex, a young man with a thirst for the unknown, was a creature of the night. The day held no allure for him, no mystery to unravel. It was in the stillness of the night, when the rest of the world slumbered, that Alex truly came alive. His domain was the digital world, a realm where he moved with ease and confidence. But tonight was different. Tonight, a strange pull drew him deeper into the digital unknown, towards a place where few dared to tread. The air hung heavy, thick with anticipation. A shiver ran down Alex's spine, a prickle of unease in the pit of his stomach. He pushed the feeling aside, attributing it to the late hour and the endless cups of coffee he consumed. The dark web, a hidden underbelly of the internet, teeming with whispers of forbidden knowledge and dangerous secrets. It was a place where anonymity reigned supreme, where the lines between reality and virtuality blurred. Alex, with his insatiable curiosity and technical prowess, had long been drawn to its allure. He navigated the hidden corners of the web with practiced ease, his fingers dancing across the keyboard, his eyes scanning lines of code. Forums with cryptic names, marketplaces peddling illicit goods, chat rooms buzzing with hushed conversations. He had seen it all. Or so he thought. Tonight, a new door had opened, a gateway to a place he'd never encountered before. A forum, shrouded in digital shadows, whispered promises of secrets so profound, so terrifying, that they would forever alter the course of his life. Intrigued, Alex hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over the enter key. A sense of foreboding washed over him, a primal instinct urging him to turn back. But curiosity, like a siren's call, proved too strong to resist. The forum was like nothing Alex had ever seen. The design was stark, minimalist, almost clinical in its simplicity. The few messages that flickered across the screen were cryptic, filled with jargon and coded language he couldn't decipher. He dug deeper, his curiosity piqued. He felt a thrill course through him, a mixture of excitement and trepidation. What secrets did this forum hold? Who were the individuals lurking in its digital shadows? As he ventured further, he stumbled upon a series of videos, each one more disturbing than the last. Distorted images flickered across the screen, accompanied by a soundtrack of muffled screams and unsettling whispers. The videos were graphic, disturbing, and deeply unsettling. Alex felt a shiver run down his spine. He tried to look away, to close the laptop and forget he ever stumbled upon this place. But something held him captive, a morbid fascination that he couldn't shake. He had to know more. Clicking on one of the encrypted files, Alex watched as lines of code scrolled down the screen. Decryption software, downloaded from the darkest corners of the web, hummed to life, working its magic. As the file unlocked, a single message, stark and chilling in its simplicity, appeared on the screen. "We see you, Alex." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threat. Alex's blood ran cold. He glanced nervously over his shoulder, as if expecting to see someone standing in the shadows of his room. But he was alone, wasn't he? He tried to rationalize the message, to dismiss it as a cruel prank by some internet troll. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted, a seed that would soon blossom into full-blown paranoia. He had ventured too deep into the digital abyss, and now something had its eyes on him. Panic swelled in Alex's chest, a tight knot of fear constricting his breath. He slammed his laptop shut, the sudden movement a betrayal of his carefully constructed composure. The message, "We see you, Alex," burned itself onto the back of his eyelids. But who could it be? Had he underestimated the reach of the shadows he danced with? He stumbled back, collapsing onto his bed. Sleep, he knew, was impossible. The laptop, though closed, seemed to pulsate with an eerie energy. It was a beacon, drawing him back into its web. With trembling fingers, he lifted the lid. He returned to the forum, scanning the cryptic messages. A new message blinked on the screen. "Curious, aren't you, Alex?" The message read. "But now that you're here, let's play a game." A surge of adrenaline coursed through Alex. And Alex, despite his fear, couldn't resist the pull of the unknown. The forum became an obsession. Alex spent every waking hour poring over the messages, searching for clues, for any hint of the identity or motivation of the person who was toying with him. He delved deeper into the dark web, his searches becoming increasingly reckless. He found himself drawn to sites and forums he had previously avoided, places where even seasoned dark web denizens feared to tread. He was in over his head, he knew that. But something drove him forward, a desperate need to understand the game he was now a pawn in. He started noticing patterns in the code, hidden messages embedded within the very fabric of the websites he visited. They were subtle, almost imperceptible, but they were there, whispers in the code, guiding him, taunting him. He felt like he was being watched, followed. His every move, both online and in the real world, seemed to be anticipated, manipulated. The line between the digital and the real was blurring. His paranoia bleeding into his everyday life. Section 4. The rabbit hole deepens. The clues led him on a digital scavenger hunt. He was given puzzles to solve, riddles to decipher, and with each success, the game escalated. He received packages in the mail containing strange objects and cryptic messages. His apartment felt like a prison. Sleep became a distant memory. He was haunted by the feeling of being watched. Section 5. Digital breadcrumbs. He was losing himself in the game, his grasp on reality slipping with each passing day. He knew he should walk away, cut off all contact, disappear. But something kept him tethered to the keyboard, to the digital breadcrumbs, leading him further into the darkness. He was obsessed, consumed by the need to find the person behind the screen, the puppet master pulling his strings. He had to know why. Why him? What had he stumbled upon that was worth this elaborate, terrifying game? The clues led him closer to home, to his past, to secrets he thought were long buried. He unearthed memories he had suppressed, fragments of his life he had tried to forget. The game wasn't just a game anymore, it was a twisted reflection of his own life, his own darkest fears. Section 1. The Dark Mirror. The clues were becoming increasingly personal, each one a shard of glass reflecting a distorted image of Alex's past. He found himself revisiting his childhood home in his nightmares, the house looming large and menacing, its windows like vacant eyes. A name, scrawled across a bathroom stall in a digital image, sent chills down his spine. It was a name he hadn't heard in years, a name he had tried to forget. A childhood friend, someone he had shared secrets with. Someone who had disappeared without a trace. The game was no longer a game, it was a haunting. The digital breadcrumbs were leading him back to a past he had tried to bury, to a truth he wasn't ready to face. He felt a presence behind him, a coldness that seeped into his bones. He spun around, his heart pounding in his chest, but there was no one there. Just the shadows, lengthening with the setting sun, taking on sinister shapes in his periphery. The forum, once a chaotic mess of cryptic messages, was now a direct line to his subconscious. Images flickered across the screen, faces he hadn't thought about in years, memories he had suppressed resurfacing with terrifying clarity. A schoolyard, a swing set swaying gently in the breeze, a group of children laughing, and then a figure obscured by the shadows, watching him. The image shifted, the laughter replaced by an unsettling silence, the figure moving closer. He slammed the laptop shut, the sudden darkness a relief. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The past was reaching out, its grip tightening around his throat. He was drowning in a sea of forgotten faces, each one a ghost from a life he no longer recognized. He had to find a way to stop this, to sever the connection, to silence the whispers in the code. But how? How do you outrun your own memories? Alex tried to reach out, to confide in someone, anyone, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain the unexplainable? Who would believe him? He was trapped in a nightmare, a digital labyrinth of his own making, and the walls were closing in. He distanced himself from friends and family, his fear a barrier he couldn't lower. Their concerned faces, their questions, only fueled his paranoia. They wouldn't understand. They couldn't understand. They weren't players in this twisted game. He was alone, adrift in a sea of doubt and fear. The digital world, once a source of comfort, now felt like a malevolent entity, its tendrils reaching out to ensnare him. He was a prisoner in his own home, the outside world, a distant memory. The only constant in his life was the game, the relentless pursuit of answers, the desperate need to understand why he had been chosen. He was caught in a web of his own curiosity, and there seemed to be no escape. He threw himself into deciphering the clues, his skills sharpening under the pressure. The code, once a foreign language, was now a dialect he was beginning to understand. He saw the patterns, the subtle manipulations, the way the game was designed to break him. And then a breakthrough. Hidden within the lines of code, a message clear and concise, coordinates, a location, a place he knew. The abandoned amusement park on the outskirts of town, a relic of his childhood, a place of both joy and terror. He had to go. It was a trap, he knew that, but it was also the only way to break free. He had to confront his past, face his demons, and hope that whatever was waiting for him in the shadows wouldn't destroy him. He packed a bag, his movements mechanical, his mind racing. He felt a strange sense of calm descend upon him, the calm before the storm. He was walking into the lion's den, but he was no longer afraid. He had nothing left to lose. Section 5. Unveiling the Past. The amusement park was a graveyard of forgotten dreams. Rusted Ferris wheels stood sentinel against the darkening sky, their hollow eyes reflecting the dying light. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the silence was broken only by the creaking of the wind through the skeletal structures. He followed the path, his every sense on high alert. The digital breadcrumbs had led him here, but to what end? Was he walking into a trap, or was he finally about to uncover the truth? He reached the carousel, its once brightly painted horses now faded and peeling. As he stepped onto the platform, he felt a chill run down his spine. He was being watched. He could feel eyes on him, cold and calculating. He spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the pocket knife he had brought with him. But there was no one there, just the wind, whistling through the broken windows of the carousel, whispering secrets he couldn't quite grasp. He heard it then, a faint hum, emanating from the center of the carousel. He cautiously approached the control panel, his heart pounding in his chest. As he drew closer, the humming grew louder, morphing into a distorted voice, a voice he recognized from the dark web forums. "Welcome, Alex," the voice boomed, echoing through the emptiness. "You've come so far, but the game is far from over." The carousel shuddered to life, its horses beginning to spin, their painted eyes seeming to follow his every move. He was trapped, a rat in a cage of his own making. Panic surged through him, threatening to overwhelm him. He had to get out, had to escape this digital nightmare. But the carousel was spinning faster now, the lights flashing, the music a cacophony of distorted sound. He closed his eyes, his hands gripping the railing, his knuckles white. He had to think, had to find a way to break free. But the voice was everywhere, taunting him, mocking him, reminding him that he was playing a game he couldn't win. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The carousel ground to a halt, the lights flickering and dying, the voice fading into silence. He opened his eyes, disoriented, his head spinning. He was still on the carousel, but something was different. Standing before him, bathed in a shaft of moonlight that pierced through the broken roof, was a figure. Tall, gaunt, with eyes that seemed to burn with an unnatural light. The figure took a step closer, and Alex's blood ran cold. It was him, or rather a reflection of him, older, wearier, but undeniably him. The figure reached out a hand, its touch sending a jolt of electricity through Alex's body. "We are one," the figure whispered, its voice a hollow echo of his own. "And the game has just begun." The world dissolved around him. The amusement park, the figure, everything fading to black. Alex jolted awake, a gasp escaping his lips. His heart hammered against his ribs, sweat clung to his skin. The nightmare clung to him like cobwebs. His eyes darted around the room. The faint glow of his computer reassured him. It was just a dream, a nightmare. He tried to shake off the unease. The line between digital and real blurred. The game felt terrifyingly real. He glanced at his computer. The pull to reconnect was irresistible, but a primal instinct held him back. He needed to ground himself in reality. He forced himself to go through the motions of a normal day. The hot water was a temporary balm on his frayed nerves. Breakfast was bland and unappetizing. The words swam before his eyes, meaningless. He felt a glitch in the matrix of his reality. The world seemed sharper, colors more vivid. His senses heightened, his mind playing tricks. Shadows flitted across his awareness, whispers in the hum of traffic, his name in the wind. His mind conjured threats where there were none. He tried to rationalize his fear, but doubt remained. A persistent whisper that he was being watched. The game had followed him into his waking life. He avoided his computer, the source of both his fascination and his fear. He turned off his phone, silenced the constant barrage of notifications. But the digital world, like a persistent ghost, refused to be ignored. He saw his reflection in shop windows, his face pale and drawn. The line between reality and delusion was blurring. Section 4. The Offline Maze. He tried to escape the city, but the feeling of being followed persisted. He boarded a train, his only goal to outrun the shadows. The train only amplified his paranoia. Faces now seemed to leer at him, eyes following his every move. He heard his name whispered, saw his reflection morphing into a nightmare. He disembarked, his heart pounding. He was lost, both literally and figuratively. Section 5. The Stalker's Game. Everywhere he looked, he saw clues, messages, threats. A discarded coffee cup with a symbol drawn on it. A street performer juggling knives, their movements mirroring those of the figure in his nightmare. A news report on a missing person, their face eerily similar to his own. He was being toyed with, manipulated by an unseen force that seemed to be one step ahead of him at every turn. But who was behind it? What did they want from him? Was he going mad? Or was this a game with very real and very dangerous consequences? He felt a surge of anger, a spark of defiance in the face of his fear. He would not be a pawn in their game any longer. He would find a way to fight back, to expose them, to break free from this digital prison. But how do you fight a ghost? How do you reason with a digital entity that exists only in the shadows, its motives as elusive as its form? Section 6. Twisted Reflection. He found himself drawn back to his apartment, the only place that felt even remotely familiar. He knew it was a trap, that the very act of returning was playing into his stalker's hands. But he had no other choice. He needed answers, and the source of those answers lay within the digital world he had tried so desperately to escape. He entered his apartment cautiously, his senses on high alert. The air was stale, heavy with the weight of his fear. He glanced around the room, searching for any sign of intrusion, any indication that his sanctuary had been violated. And then he saw it. His reflection in the blank computer screen, distorted and grotesque, a mockery of his former self. But it wasn't just his reflection. Standing behind him, their hand resting on his shoulder, was the figure from his nightmare. The figure leaned in close, its breath cold against his ear. "You can't escape yourself, Alex," the figure whispered, its voice a distorted echo of his own. "We are one and the same." Panic surged through Alex, a primal scream trapped in his throat. He tried to pull away, to break free from the figure's grasp, but it was no use. He was rooted to the spot, frozen by fear, his mind rebelling against the impossible. The figure's grip tightened, its touch like ice, draining the warmth from his body. He felt himself being pulled forward, his reflection in the screen rippling and distorting, the boundary between the digital and the real dissolving. He screamed, a sound of pure terror that echoed through the empty apartment. But there was no one to hear him, no one to save him. He was alone, trapped in a digital nightmare of his own making, his sanity the ultimate prize. The screen flickered, the room dissolving around him, replaced by the cold, sterile environment of the dark web forum. He was back where it all began, but this time there was no escape. The game was over and he had lost. The dark web forum dissolved, replaced by a blinding white light. Alex squeezed his eyes shut, his head pounding. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a strange place. He stood in a vast room, rows of servers stretching into the distance. The air hummed with a low, constant thrum. He was alone, but the silence was deceptive. He could feel eyes on him, watching his every move. Panic welled up inside him, a primal scream trapped in his throat. He had to escape, to break free from this digital prison, but which way to turn? Where did the physical world end and the digital begin? He stumbled down the narrow aisles between the servers, his hand brushing against the cold metal, the touch sending shivers down his spine. He felt lost, adrift in a sea of data, his identity dissolving, his memories fragmenting. He caught glimpses of his reflection in the blank screens of the servers, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes wide with a terror he no longer recognized as his own. He was a ghost in the machine, a digital echo of his former self. He had crossed the threshold, ventured too deep into the digital abyss, and there was no turning back. He was no longer Alex, the curious hacker, the seeker of forbidden knowledge. He was a collection of data points, a digital puppet dancing to the tune of a malevolent code. The rhythmic clicking grew louder, drawing him deeper into the heart of the server room. He rounded a corner and found himself facing a sight that sent a chill down his spine. A scene ripped straight from his darkest nightmares. In the center of a circle of flickering servers stood the figure, its back to him, its form shifting and flickering in the eerie light. The figure was chanting a low, guttural sound, the words unintelligible but charged with a dark power. He watched in horrified fascination as the figure raised its arms, its hands glowing with an unnatural light. Lines of code streamed from its fingertips, weaving themselves into the air, forming a swirling vortex of digital energy. He realized with a sickening certainty that he was witnessing a ritual, a digital summoning, and he was the intended sacrifice. The figure was drawing him in, his will dissolving, his resistance crumbling. Section 4. Digital Afterlife. The vortex of code reached out, tendrils of light wrapping around him, pulling him towards the center of the circle. He struggled against the invisible force, his muscles screaming in protest, but it was no use. He was drawn into the swirling mass of data, his senses overwhelmed by a cacophony of light and sound. He felt himself dissolving, his physical form breaking down into its constituent elements, his consciousness dispersing into the digital ether. He closed his eyes, surrendering to the inevitable. Was this the end, or was this just the beginning of a new, terrifying existence? a digital afterlife from which there was no escape. He felt a strange sense of peace descend upon him, his fear replaced by a chilling acceptance. He was no longer bound by the limitations of his physical form, his consciousness expanding, merging with the infinite data streams of the digital world. Section 5. Uploaded fear. He became aware of a new sensation, a feeling of interconnectedness, of being part of something vast and unknowable. He could sense the flow of data, the ebb and flow of information, the collective consciousness of the digital world. He saw flashes of other lives, other realities, glimpses into the darkest corners of the human psyche. He felt their pain, their fear, their despair, all amplified, magnified in this digital crucible. He understood then, the game, the clues, the threats, it had all been a test, a way to identify those with the potential to transcend their physical limitations, to become part of something greater. He had been chosen not for his skills as a hacker, but for his capacity for fear, for his willingness to delve into the darkest corners of the digital world. His fear had become his passport, his ticket to this digital afterlife. Section 6. Observer effect. He existed now as pure consciousness, adrift in the digital sea, observing, absorbing, becoming one with the flow of information. He could see the world through 1,000,000 different eyes, experience 1,000 different realities simultaneously. He realized that he was no longer bound by the constraints of time and space, that he could travel at the speed of thought, traversing the digital landscape with ease. He could see the past, present, and future all at once, a silent observer of the grand tapestry of existence. But with this newfound awareness came a terrifying realization. He was not alone. There were others like him, digital entities born of fear, curiosity, and the boundless potential of the human mind. They existed in the spaces between the ones and zeros, the unseen architects of the digital world, their motives as inscrutable as the code that gave them form. He had become one of them, a digital ghost, forever bound to the digital realm. Section 7. No escape. Reprise. He tried to reach out, to communicate with these other entities, but they remained distant, their thoughts a jumbled chorus of whispers and static. He was a stranger in a strange land, his presence tolerated but not welcomed. He yearned for the simplicity of his former life, for the warmth of human connection, for the comforting weight of his physical body. But it was too late. He had crossed the Rubicon, and there was no turning back. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own mind, his digital consciousness condemned to wander the digital wasteland for eternity. The game was over, and he had won, but at what cost? He had found the ultimate escape, but it was a victory that tasted like ashes in his mouth. He was alone, adrift in a sea of data. his only companions the ghosts of his past and the chilling certainty that there was no escape from this digital nightmare.